We are live. Turn my light on. There we go. That's much better. Kind of a last minute, technical adjustment. So how's everybody doing? It's Sunday night. Hopefully you guys are all doing well. We've got a cool subject for tonight, and that is the parasitic loss associated with driving a supercharger. That's right. As we all know, any sort of accessory that you have, air conditioning, water pump, power steering, even the alternator require power to drive them. So when we run an engine on the dyno, on the engine dyno, and run without those, obviously the motor makes more power. It's actually making the same power. It's just some of it gets consumed by driving those accessories. And a supercharger is no different. In fact, a supercharger is going to be much greater than all of those things. In fact, all of those things combined don't really add up to what a decent supercharger requires to drive. I'm often surprised when I bring this subject up to people that they think that it's 20 or 30 horsepower to drive a supercharger. It's 20 or 30 horsepower. Oh, that would be nice. It's much more than that, as we'll see. And it depends a lot on how much work you're asking the supercharger to do. How much airflow are you having it process, and then at what pressure and what RPM and all that stuff. It's actually quite a bit. Frosty cold beverage. So tonight we're going to look at, I found when I was going through, I'm cleaning, and when I'm going through stuff, I find a bunch of old data that I have, airflow data from LS7 head tests and 5-liter forwards, all kinds of stuff. But what I ran across is this, which this is a, see, look at that. Those are, you can see what they are is parasitic loss curves for two different kinds of superchargers. One of them is an Eaton 2650, very common, good supercharger, works real well. A lot of guys using that in the various kinds of configurations, ported versions, the Kong version, all that stuff. Good supercharger because finally that supercharger is big enough to really make some fairly serious power. Whereas before, even with the 2.3 liter, it was never really a comparison between that supercharger displacement and the bigger ones that were offered by KENNE Bell and Whipple and stuff. And so they kind of always had the upper hand on stuff that was, 4-digit kind of power level stuff. So, but now this 2650, this thing makes real power, especially when they're wicked up, and especially when you improve the airflow going into the blower and, port them in the way that people do and make them more and more efficient. And they work pretty well. And so they have a broader range now covered with that factory style supercharger. And obviously that rotor pack is used by a lot of different guys in different housings and stuff. But the interesting thing is, like I said, when I was talking to various people comment and ask questions and send me messages and stuff. And when we talk about how much power it takes to drive the blower, they're usually underselling it by quite a bit. And this is a perfect example because this isn't even at the all of it range. And obviously, when you're spinning anything, but when you're spinning a supercharger, all the way at what is kind of, let's call it a maximum level would be. And for superchargers, a lot of times that's a bearing rating. So it's a maximum speed for the rotors and for the bearings. And so they rated it kind of a safe amount. Now, obviously, racers don't listen to that number because they take that as a challenge. Oh, really? Eaton rates it here? Well, I'm obviously going to run mine a few thousand RPM, or how many over RPM I can find pulleys for to go beyond that. And the thing is, as we've seen with a lot of stuff, just like with the Big Bang stuff, they made a 5.3 liter that was originally rated by the factory near 300 horsepower. Well, guys are making 1,500 with those. So obviously that was a conservative rating. It's kind of the same with the blower stuff. Although they're much closer on their maximum RPM range, because on the blowers, they may take that for short bursts, but not for any sort of extended period of time, as we'll talk about when we did this blower dyno testing. So this was actually a comparison, one of the many comparisons done by the guys from KENNE Bell. They actually have a dedicated blower dyno back in Sweden, and it's driven by an LS motor. Actually, that's what they use to spin the blower. And the reason that they do that is some of these superchargers require a great deal of power. So having an electric motor that's sized for what they're trying to do is, takes a lot of energy and takes a big electric motor and stuff. So it was easier for them to configure what they needed to do with about a 500 horsepower LS motor, which is easy to put together, obviously, and this runs a long time. It's been working really well. So what they do is, and so you know that when you're running a supercharger, the parasitic loss associated with driving that isn't fixed. It varies, as I said before, it varies with a number of things. It varies with the engine speed or the blower speed, the rotor speed. It also varies with the boost level, and it also varies with the airflow level. So you have to adjust all of those things. So when you're running something like this on the blower dyno, you have valves that regulate the how much inlet air is going into the motor, because you can run something at a given blower speed and then regulate the amount of boost that it puts out with a valve on the outside, on the discharge side, to regulate how much airflow it's blowing. You can regulate it on the inlet side. There's lots of different things. You can run a lot of different combinations, because here's the thing: if you put a supercharger on a 300-inch motor and you're spinning it at 15,000 RPM, it's going to make a different boost level, and it's going to process a different amount of air than if you had that same blower spinning that same blower speed on a 400-inch motor or a 500-inch motor. Something that was much more efficient. The amount of airflow that's going to process is going to go up. The boost is going to go down. So you want to be able to measure all of these different kinds of variables to show what it will do in obviously all sorts of different kinds of situations, whether you're running it on a, if you're putting a 1,000 horsepower blower on a stock, 250 horsepower 5-liter Mustang engine, or you're putting this 1,000 horsepower blower on a 600 horsepower modified Coyote motor. So it's going to vary a lot. So you want to be able to adjust all those things, and they can do that. While they're doing it on the blower dyno, they monitor the air temperature going in, obviously the blower speed, the discharge temperature, the boost coming out, the amount of airflow being processed, with a mass air meter going through the whole system. Lots of really, really good data. And the thing that's nice about it is, on a blower dyno, it's something that it gets more difficult to do even on an engine dyno, because the run is, or on even a chassis dyno, because the run is so short. But they can make the temperature, for instance, the discharge temperature out of the blower just stabilize. Because if you load that thing on a blower dyno at 15,000 RPM, let's say, at some boost level and some airflow level, and then if you run it there for 30 seconds, let's say, or 40 seconds, you're going to actually get real temperature readings on what's happening with the discharge temperature. And then obviously they can also run intercoolers, and when they're running intercoolers, they run the temperature of the water going in, the temperature of the water coming out, the pressure drop across the core. Lots of really, really good data. But what we're going to talk about, this is a direct comparison between a 2650 Eaton supercharger and the KENNE Bell 3.2 liter. So right off the bat, it's kind of slanted toward the bigger blower. I mean, because the bigger blower has more capacity for every revolution. It can support more total airflow because it's bigger, unless for some reason it couldn't run as much maximum blower speed as the other one, but that's not the case here. So when we have, and it creates a graph, because they'll run it at, they'll stop it at different CFM levels or different RPM levels or different flow levels. They can adjust it however they want to get as much data as you can. So in this particular instance, they ran each of the superchargers. They ran them at they wanted to pick 1,600 CFM. So 1,600 CFM, to give you an idea. Let's see what we would do here. That might be 1,000 horsepower or more. Yeah, a little over 1,000 horsepower, let's say. So that'd be a realistic number for both of those superchargers. The 3.2 liter KENNE Bell will support way over that, and I've seen more than that from the 2650 as well. So they're looking at flowing it at 1,600 CFM. In the case of the 2650, this was 22 pounds of boost. The thing that I don't have here, and I looked for the sheet to find out what the pulley ratios were, what the speed was of each of the superchargers. I don't have that here. I know that I had it, and it was on one of the sheets, but I don't have it here. What I can guarantee you is that because one of them was a 2.65 blower and one of them was a 3.2 blower, the 265 had to spin faster to make that CFM. It just has to, because it's a smaller blower. So at any rate, on the spinning them at the speed required to process that amount of airflow at that boost level, the 2650 required 239 horsepower to support that much airflow at that boost level and that blower speed. So that tells you right away, when we look at our comparisons on the, I have lots of video up on turbos versus blowers and centrifugals and roots blowers and twin screws and all that stuff. This is why when I show those, why the turbo always makes more power at the same boost level. When we regulate it based on boost pressure, if we regulate this at a pressure side, we can see why now that a turbo is not going to have anywhere near that kind of parasitic loss. Guys will argue with a turbo, yeah, but you have back pressure and there is loss there and yada yada yada. It's not anywhere near this kind of number. To make it, think about making 1,000 horsepower with an S480 or 2 GT45s or whatever we're going to use. The losses associated with driving those two turbos is going to be minuscule compared to what this is for a supercharger. That's why we see these big differences. If you were to run 22 pounds from turbos, we would get the multiplier of 22 pounds, which would be about 1.5 or 1.6 times whatever the NA power was. On a blower dyno, we're not seeing that because there's no NA power. But on the turbo, we would obviously be making more power at any kind of boost level, exactly because of this. For as an example, on the KENNE Bell, the twin screw is a more efficient design than the 2650 is. The 2650 is a roots, although it is a twisted lobe. They call it a hybrid roots. And what it's doing is transitioning more towards a twin screw, which if you read any SAE paper ever written, that it's a twin screw is a more efficient design than a roots blower is. But to give you an idea, the 3.2 liter required only 202 horsepower to drive that, to supply that same amount of airflow at that boost level. So, you know, we're spinning that blower slower and the blower is more efficient. The other thing that happens that they didn't show here, that I know that having talked to the guys at KENNE Bell many times, that the discharge temperature out of the blower is also lower at the same boost level on a twin screw than it is on a roots blower. So coming out of the blower, the temperature's lower. And a lot of times after you run it through the intercooler, the differential between those two gets kind of equalized, especially if you're running it at a boost and flow and power level where the intercooler, it's very easy for it to support that. If you're maxing out the intercooler, then it becomes more skewed again back toward the twin screw being more efficient. But if you're only running it at 600 or 700 horsepower and the intercooler brick that you have will easily cool down 1,000 horsepower with this stuff, then it has no problem starting to equalize the temperatures coming out of the intercooler after from the blower. Even if the roots blower was a little bit higher going in, they will be much closer actually coming out, and they have all of that data. That's the great thing about a blower dyno. And we see from the graph here that at every CFM level, from, I think that they ran it down as low as 600 CFM, that at every CFM level, the twin screw has less parasitic loss associated with driving that amount of airflow, really supplying that amount of airflow to the combination. So it works out fairly well. The one thing I will say is usually on a smaller blower like that, because you're spinning it faster to do that, that translates a lot of times into the blower being more responsive down low. Not that you have to worry about low speed response with either one of these kinds of positive displacement blowers, certainly compared to the turbo if it's at really low engine speeds, or a centrifugal blower, which would have very little boost down low. But I thought that this was interesting. And I've seen these numbers where they go up even further to running these things at basically maximum flow rate and maximum, you know, red line kind of impeller speeds and bearing speeds, that these numbers can easily grow with the 2650 to near 300 horsepower to drive that blower at the level that some of the racers are spinning them at. And also the thing that was interesting is when they were doing this testing, running that blower at these kinds of maximum levels for about a minute resulted in damage to the blower. So if you were running that thing, legging that thing, you were all in on maximizing the blower, and you were at some place where, like a Silver State race, where you could be at wide open throttle for an extended period of time, it's actually not going to last very long at that speed. What I think that the drive or something sheared on it. Maybe there's a coupler or something in there that kind of disintegrated. But it just goes to show you, and that's one of the problems with superchargers, in addition to running into belt slippage issues, which can be a plague, people that have these all-out kind of combinations. But as you start pushing it toward the limit, you start getting to a point where you should start thinking about a bigger blower. So rather than continuing to spin the littler one that you have, the littler, and in this case less efficient one, faster and faster and faster, and because you're only running it for 9 seconds or whatever, when you're running it in the quarter mile, it will last and do that. But it's just like with the turbo stuff. We can run a GT45 and see how much maximum power we can make out of a GT45. And we're whittling away at another 3 or 4 horsepower, 5 or whatever. Let's get the back pressure down. Let's get more flow. Let's put on a smaller motor. Allow it to do all that. Let's just put a bigger turbo on it. Because now it will support the boost level that we want, and it will make the power that we want. It's the same thing with blowers, that rather than spin the 2650 to 1,000,000 RPM, where it gets more problematic and is using a lot more power to do that. Because that's the thing, is you go up in blower speed and up in boost and up in airflow, hopefully. You also go up in parasitic loss. So some of that you gain is being chopped away from the drive losses associated with driving that supercharger. And that's just one of the costs when you're running any kind of supercharger, whether it's a twin screw or a roots blower or centrifugal, whatever you're running, there are losses associated with doing that. So let's see how you guys are doing for this weekend, for Sunday night. Let's see. Somebody's got a GT45 question. Richard, my VS Racing 50 millimeter wastegate is opening at 2 to 3 pounds with 1 spring in it. It should be around 7 PSI. Have you seen this before? It's a eBay GT45. What is blue collar? What size motor do you have, and what's the NA power output? The opening of the wastegate is also predicated upon back pressure. So the back pressure will try to open the gate. So if you have lots of back pressure, it will push the gate open. You can alleviate that by, I don't know what kind of wastegate controller that you're running, but if you run it to the top and the bottom and control it that way, like a 3-port does, you can even do that with a manual one. If you did it that way, you'll probably have better boost control. Yeah, my background's here. But you can see, look, I got a bunch of stuff off of my cabinets there. The boxes are there. You can see. And a camshaft, because that's how we do it. And I found $20 more Canadian. It's just laying in a box somewhere. Can you do a video with meth injection, air intake temps of superchargers and turbos? That's already up. I did a meth injection comparison with the California windshield washer fluid, the low temperature -20 stuff, and then with boost, the boost juice. And we did that in a comparison with the intercooler, and you can see that that's up. And I've done lots of those where we compare what the water method does. How many emails have you gotten so far for the Nova? I think, I'm guessing we're up near 80 or 90 or something. Yeah, Dan, the top fuel ones can take, like you were saying, 800, 900, 1,000 horsepower to spin those. I remember reading an article in Hot Rod about, because they don't dyno test those motors, but they do test the blowers. And the guy had a 351 Windsor that he used to spin the blower, just to spin the blower, and he had to upgrade his 351, and he built a 408 or something for it, because it didn't make enough power to actually spin the blower once it was all done up. Yep, the bookshelf is clean. The new Gen 5 Whipple 3-liter makes 150 to 200 wheel horsepower more than their older 2.9 with less boost. So I'd like to see a blower dyno comparison of that. A stock 5.3, I'm thinking my back pressure is too high. I'm going to add other spring and see what it does. I'm not running the boost controller yet. A stock 5.3 shouldn't have back pressure problems on that combination. Yes, the boost caboose. I wish they would have done that a little bit differently, but that was an interesting video. GT45 going on a 94C 2500 TBI 5.7, fitting intercool, installing 4-link 8 lug with airbags in all 4 corners. Are you using the throttle body injection on that? Craig, would a 102 millimeter throttle body make more power than a 90 millimeter throttle body on an 800 horsepower Vortex supercharged small block? Probably not. That's probably not your inlet restriction. What forged rotating assembly would you recommend for a turbo 6-liter iron block? And would a 408 hold up? A 408 will hold up fine to boosted applications. Tell me what kind of power that you want. And Summit has their Pro LS rotating assembly stuff for 6 liters. I wouldn't use if I was doing a turbo 6-liter, I would leave the stock block and crank, and I would just put rods and pistons in it and then put boost. So if you're looking for like 1,000 horsepower stuff, that's easy. And even if you're looking for more than that, if you're looking for all of it, then maybe you could go with the forged steel crank and stuff. Richard, just got my project card. You have a service that you offer that helps people like me build an engine. Well, you're here. You need to ask questions. There's a lot of sharp people here. And I'm here too. So the LSA blower might not be worth it at a current pricing since they let the cat out of the bag on those. Wonder how much horsepower it costs to run one of those at serious boost levels. It's a similar thing. It can't support as much airflow. The LSA blower can't, unless if you're talking about the Cadillac one. That can't support as much airflow as either one of these. Not even close to this. A reliable 1,000 horsepower. So just put an S475 or an S480 on that, and just put 4 rods and pistons in it on a 6-liter, and you're good. I'm disappointed I missed your stream regarding ITB and port throttles earlier. You can go back and watch it though, and all we did was talk about whether or not putting a common plenum on individual throttle body manifold, or we discussed how it changes it. Why did the original builder of the death metal charger not like the car when they showed it to him? I cannot find a video of that. I don't know. I'm not involved in any of that stuff. I'm not part of the Motor Trend family. I'm more like the redheaded stepchild. Braden, I have Gen 4 rods and flat top Summit pistons in my 5.3. I'll be spraying nitrous on it eventually. That will be good. Looking to make a reliable, daily driven, 50 mile per gallon, 1,200 wheel horsepower on my Boss 363. There are a lot of good. You're torn on head selection, Nikki. There's a lot of good heads for that. Anything from AFR, the Dart Pro 1 stuff, Trick Flow stuff. There's lots of good heads for that. None of those heads are going to stop you from making that kind of power if you have a turbo on it. TBI is in place with standalone injector controller and 2000 cc. Okay, let me know how that works out. I'm a little worried about distribution, although distribution on a TBI manifold might not be bad because it's kind of all going through that same thing. Richard, do you suggest my boost reference for the wastegate comes from the compressor housing or the intake manifold? If it comes from the intake manifold, your boost level will go up. If it comes from the compressor housing, especially if you have an intercooler, it's going to be lower because it's hitting that boost pressure higher, a higher boost pressure number right at the compressor before it does that in the manifold. Richard, Matt's off-road recovery has an LS and wants a quick spool turbo for towing. I told him he needs to get with you. Yeah, that's easy. We just need to figure out what kind of power he wants. For my next trick, 2 clothes washing appliance motors and a lawnmower engine powering a bike. It's okay if it's powering a mini bike. That would be super cool. Richard, are you familiar with the 2015 Z28? Just tell me about it. Probably. I can make it up. Most people will be doing less live streams. That's not how I roll, because, you know, I'm interested in 3V 4.6 liter. I've done some 3V stuff. Speaking of reliable 1,000 horsepower, have you seen the turbine-powered jet boat 777? That's kind of cool. Is it a like a helicopter turbine? Not too daily driven. I was looking at the cheaper Avenger 205s. Okay. So what do you think? The max horsepower I could safely get out of my LM4 stock bottom end turbo without sending it to the moon like Alice? Oh, what is an LM4? And do you have ring gap in it? And is it a turbo? And do you have a cam and stuff? If it's a 4.8 or 5.3, obviously 4-digit power level can be done pretty easily. And porting LT1 heads for an LS7 build. I would like to put an LT4 on it with the modded port injection. With a stock LT4 provided an F air for an LS7. Would this? I'm confused. You have an LS7 short block that you put LT1 heads on it, and then you're putting LT4 fuel injectors and pump and stuff on it. Is that what's going on? That would be enough for an NA LS7, because you can make 800 or 900 with the LT4 stuff if you have a good pump feeding that. The 2015 Z28 had the 7-liter in it, right? Had an LS7 motor in it? Or did it have a, yeah, it did, right? Uh-oh, someone's bringing up Helmholtz resonance. I need to see what's going on there. You can also use Helmholtz. There's a Z in there. Helmholtz resonance with a common plenum with an individual runner, since you're just using a resonance wave if they were true individual. Doritos and French onion, I don't know. I like both of those. I don't know if I've tried them together. A blow-off valve won't blow off if it's referenced from the intake. That's not accurate. He's asking about the wastegate being referenced from the intake. It needs to be referenced from the intake. And the blow-off valve absolutely has to be referenced from the intake and not from the turbo. It has to get vacuum, and it won't get vacuum at the turbo. I have a 2006 GMC Sierra 5.3, and I want to make 800 wheel horsepower. You need to do boost. And on the motor, I would do cam and springs and ring gap and a turbo. Do questions, what is the cubic inches of those drag racing cars with 10,000 horsepower? Can you take those blocks out of those engines, put like 5,000 horsepower? It's a horsepower and put a 2,000 NOS. Sure, you want to make it. The reason that those things are making so much power, one is they're 500 inches. They have a really big Roots, a 1471, I think, Roots supercharger on them. But what helps them make that much power is they're feeding it with a substantial amount of nitromethane. And so they won't make that much power without the nitromethane. But yeah, you can run lots of nitrous with it, although I don't know why you would. LS7, 6-speed, 390 gears. So what do you want to know about your LS7? I've run lots of LS7 tests too. America wants to know a good repair shop in Cleveland, Ohio for a 1964 Cruise-O-Matic. Leaks from the front seal. What type of, Brian, evening, Richard, what type of boost do you recommend for a Silverado 1500 LY5 daily that tows on the weekends, already doing cam and headers? A Roots blower works good for that. It depends on how much money you want to spend. A turbo would be the cheapest way. What's up, guys? Got off from Advanced Auto Parts. I'm glad I was able to catch up. Welcome, Jerry. Okay, so Dan was talking about Russian helicopter turbines. They've tried a few, and now we're at 2,300 horsepower. You go to the river with it, one driver, one navigator, who just points 160 miles an hour. That's a lot in a boat. I think the most I've been in a boat is about 95. That may be my low boost issue. I have my wastegate referenced at my compressor with an intercooler and 2.5 engine piping. If you just take the reference line and move it to the intake manifold, you're going to go up in boost. It won't be a lot. So let me know. Hopefully you'll do that tonight, and then tomorrow morning or tomorrow night, come back on Blue Collar and let us know what the change was, because that's back-to-back data. We'd like to see that. What boost level can be achieved before lifting the heads on small block Chevy with stock head bolts? That's not going to be a thing. It's not going to be a boost level. It would be a cylinder pressure level. No new videos on the 8.1 because I haven't done any more testing on them yet. Ryan, you said before with a higher compression ratio equals less boost for a goal for a given goal horsepower. Yeah, because you're making more NA power. And then if you're making more NA, it takes less boost to get to any sort of like other boosted goal. 10-to-1 compression be reliable. It would if you have the right amount of octane for your combination of compression and timing and boost. The stroke is not going to matter. Just what you're looking at it in the wrong way. Tell me how much power you want to make and what the motor is. If you have a 4.8 or 5.3 or 6.0 or 302 or whatever it is, and then tell me how much power you want to make. We'll just tell you how to get it. Diesel Dan, would you recommend a Holly Terminator X for heads and cam 5.8 and 92 Bronco so I could keep the factory style intake system but have a modern tunable ECU? Well, on a 95, you should be able to, or 92, you should be able to tune the factory stuff anyway. An A9L computer, there are things that you can tune that with already out there. There have been for a long time, and you can get the same thing with that. I don't know if that Bronco is a mass air car or not. 92, I don't know on the 5.8. I like the mass air stuff because it drives really nice. But if you want to go in and do all the tuning, but if you can adjust the factory stuff, you can still put whatever timing number that you want, and you can adjust the injector so you get whatever airfill you want. And really, that's all that you need. Admiral's on board. I just heard an S197 Coyote with headers and off-road H-pipe and a Roush axle back. It sounded godly. Good. What's up? Rich just drove my turbo Camaro and it's idling randomly 800 RPM to 1600 RPM. No vacuum leak that I could find. What could be? I would look at the IAC first of all. The idle air motor or the tune. Always remember, regardless of what happens, blame the tune. I'm gonna have to tell Ish and Eric about that. Noodles, hit the like button. According to Borg Warner, a turbo feeding a 6-liter 1600 CFM at 20 pounds of boost requires 136 turbo shaft horsepower. I would find that really hard to believe. So without that loss, that we would have 136 more horsepower. So you're saying there's only going to be 100 horsepower or less than 100 horsepower, or no, about 100 horsepower difference between the turbo, and this was 22 pounds, between the turbo and the blower. I can tell you, I can guarantee you it will be more than that, having run that test back to back. Top fuel heads flow over 700 CFM. That's a lot. How much of a power difference would inch and 5/8 headers versus inch and 7/8 headers on the 5.3 be, and what would the max power be for each runner size? I have no idea what max power is. That's a ridiculous thing because you can make 1,000,000 horsepower with those if you put enough boost to them. You know, you put a big supercharger on them or whatever. There might not be any change in power between an 1 5/8 and an 1 7/8 header on a mild or stock 5.3. It might not be any at all. And if there was, you might have a little bit here and nothing here, and it would be very little. Watch an old episode of Engine Masters. Where did your pythons go? Get back at it. Oh, so you're telling me that I'm weak and lethargic? Nice, thanks. I'm glad you're here. Thanks for showing up. I asked the Holly guys at LS Fest West this weekend about moving the knock sensor out from under the intake on my Gen 3 LS with the Terminator X, and they just said throw them away. We don't ever run them on the engine dyno, and I don't know if I don't know if guys are running them in the car. At what horsepower level do you stop trusting LS1 blocks? We don't normally run the LS1, LS2, or LS3 stuff above about 1,000 horsepower. New 4.3 liter and Chevy trucks have direct injection, and can they cope with boost through the stock ECU? They can, but you're limited in fuel flow. So you have to be able to go up in fuel flow, which takes a little bit of work with a direct injected motor. Have you used a Dart LS 10-degree head on an LS 434? I have not. George, honestly, I don't know if I would go with exotic heads on a motor like that with a 2650, because an airflow research head or trick flow head or whatever, the 2650 is going to be the thing that limits the amount of power that you can make. I'm building a Gen 4 4.8 liter with forged rods. Would it be worth it to use lightweight crankshaft to try and make it a bit more responsive in boost? No. That's not going to do anything. Speaking of Engine Masters, I like the picture we get here and on the channel and then on Engine Masters. Engine Masters is a lot of fun because those guys have done a lot of really cool things that I haven't done. So it's good to talk to those guys. Richard, on Turbo L33. So we ran one of those recently with an air-to-air intercooler. What's the most boost? I don't know. I don't have answers for any of that stuff. What's the most boost you can run on 91 pump gas? It depends on so many things that there's no answer for that. The biggest reason most NHRA classes run push rods is because the rules require 2 valve per cylinder. Brendan, can you please explain why not? Can I explain why not what? If I've gone through more than one other question or answer, then I've already forgotten. How bad do curves, bend, affect intake runner length? Not a lot. A lot of people get worried about having bends in them and having it not be straight. I don't think it needs to be straight. On all the intake manifolds I've ever built, we make them to, you have to make them fit the packaging. So I built an intake recently with, an intake that went, and looped all the way around, kind of like the factory ones do. And the reflected wave still travels the length of the thing. So it doesn't care that there's a curve. The airflow might, but very rarely are you at the limit of the airflow of the port. Charles, I wouldn't try more than 50 pounds on 91 octane. That's probably good advice. I feel like we get a character on Engine Masters. We get the real Richard here. Wow. People are just throwing shade like left and right. I think somebody's asking about the 91 octane. I think if you look at Matt's stuff, what he does is his rule, and I like these general kind of rules because I got these all the time from guys at Kenny Bell. But on Matt's deal, his was like 14 pounds and 14 degrees of timing on 91. Although I think his might have been 93 because they get better stuff back there. On 91, it might be less than that. So you're looking at getting down near single digit like timing levels for that kind of stuff. Intake runner length is about flow, but also resonance. It's actually not about flow. It's about reflected wave. I've been subwoofer boxes at night. Oh my gosh, the subwoofer stuff. A subwoofer stuff is not the same. It's not the same as flow on an intake manifold. Knock sensors have to be designed for their mounting position and specifically for the motor they're used on. Also, if you can make it a stroke or something that can ruin knock sensors as well. There's a lot of things that just the way that we attach it to the dyno and the coupler and stuff like can activate knock sensors. We've gone through that a couple of times now on the engine dyno. And it takes a lot. I mean, to give you an idea, on the way back when they were, I think it was I'm thinking it was the Lightning, and somebody might correct me. I might be wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure it was the Lightning. Ford commissioned Roush to do the knock detection on the Lightning, and they ended up just turning it off. So even the guys from Roush, with help from Ford, didn't get the knock sensor technology on a factory motor that was all the same. I think it was the Lightning. It was one of those supercharged applications. So it's not an easy thing. And then when you change a bunch of other stuff, put roller rockers on it, put a solid motor mount on, don't run any of the accessory, all of these things, it may hear other things that make it activate. And so it's not, it takes a lot of work. That's what I'm saying. I'm a supercharger fan. Most people here want them tuned to crack and popple on diesel. I hate that. I got a quick story about that. About a guy that a buddy of mine, Bernie, tuned a guy's Harley Davidson because it was like blah 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 blah. It was ran like a Harley Davidson, and he tuned it, and it was a carbureted one, and he tuned it, and so it ran perfect. It started right up. It drove around. It didn't make any noise. It didn't pop under decel or anything. And then the guy drove around and said, "Yeah, it works great." And then he came back the next day, and then it was pop, 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 pop. I was, popping under decel and stuff like that. And he's like, "Yeah, but I just miss it. I think it sounds better like that." He's like, "Oh my God, I just spent 3 or 4 hours making your thing right, and now you just want it for that kind of noise," which is okay. But you could have told me that before I wasted a whole day doing that. When a boat has a roll cage, it's going to be a spirited ride. You better be cinching up the harness on that thing. Let's see. Gapping rings, LY6 rod, torque specs. We use the factory torque specs back on the rods because we reuse all the rod bolts and stuff. I've seen a few twin turbo builds pushing through a root style supercharger. In my mind, it doesn't make sense. Setup would be limited to how much airflow the blower can move. The blower becomes much more efficient when you have positive pressure feeding the supercharger, but ultimately it would make more power with just the turbos. It just won't be as responsive. I mean, I did the compound deal on the 3800, and we did 2 turbos on the LS. And then I also did a compound with the Eaton supercharger and 2 turbos with the help from the guys from, they did all the work, the guys from HP Performance on an 03 Cobra. And it works. It's just not, it's not ideal. Do the intercooler bricks go inside the ram air, work for road racing or Silver State? That would not be what I would choose for Silver State or for open road racing. I would not choose an air-to-water core for that. I would choose an air-to-air, only because at the Silver State kind of thing on even road racing, you have a lot of vehicle speed. So if you have a lot of vehicle speed all the time, every time you're using the intercooler, you have enough vehicle speed to get cooling from an air-to-air, especially at the Silver State. I mean, you might be going between 150 and 200 miles an hour, and you're doing it for a long period of time. So you got ample airflow. For short bursts, an air-to-water is going to be the way to go, even for Bonneville, because we can fill up the ice water tank and run ice water through it, and the ice water tank lasts for the whole run. Same thing with drag racing, although for drag racing, it becomes a balance between how much weight you have in that system versus how much gain it gets you. For Bonneville, there's none of that trade-off because we want more weight just so that we can plant the vehicle. At Bonneville, the aerodynamic drag becomes the thing and not vehicle weight. So for there, it's very much more important. But for road racing, I would pick an air-to-air. Lawnmower car got 41 miles per gallon. The only way that he got 41 miles per gallon is if he also got 41 miles per gallon from any other carburetor or any other fuel injection. A carburetor will not do that. A carburetor does not determine your fuel mileage. What would you put in a Dodge Dart, a 6-liter or 5.3? Either one of those are good. The 6-liter makes more power NA than the 5-liter does, or the 5.3 there. NA versus boost when porting is size a goal, is velocity. Brian, for me, when I'm running a boosted motor, I look at it as an NA motor, and then we add boost to it. So if you want to make, well, I look at it two ways. That's one way. So if we improve our NA power with head porting or camshaft intake manifold, then whatever our power goal is, we can reach that power goal at a lower boost level. The other way to look at it is go get a junkyard motor, put a cam and springs in, and then put a turbo on it. And if 1,000 horsepower is your goal, you don't need to do any head porting. The head is already there. It already works. LS 4.8 L83 heads and Holly high ram and turbo. Please make this happen. Do you know what it does? Okay, there's two things there. An L83 is a Gen 5. It's two things. One, it's a Gen 5 5.3 liter and not a 4.8. Or it is a 350-inch 1982, 84 Crossfire Corvette engine. Putting a high ram on it, on either one of those applications, is not a good idea. And a turbo is also not a, well, a turbo is always a good idea, but neither one of those applications would I put a high ram on. Matt has done 4.8s with sloppy stage 2s and high rams. And if you want to rev them really high and run a lot of boost on them for drag racing, that's okay. But it's not, that's never a combination that I would recommend. Roots blowers only care about pressure differential. Okay. I heard the Z06 future may be up in the air due to this green movement. It's not the green movement. They're having problems with that engine, I think. Have you run the same engine, supercharger and turbo with no other changes? Yes, many, many times. The video is all already up. In fact, not only did I do that, I ran an 03 Cobra motor with a twin screw, a Eaton supercharger, a Root supercharger, a centrifugal, and a turbo. And I also did it again on a B16 Honda, and also did it again on a 5-liter Ford. And I've run those individual tests many, many times, so we know what they do. Richard, have you ever watched the I Do Cars YouTube channel? No, I'm going to have to check that out. I Do Cars. Is a Coyote still banned from Engine Masters? There's no more Engine Masters Challenge that I know of. I think that that's stopped. I still have knock detection earmuffs. I've used that copper tubing method before. With a real long pole, can't you heat soak the air-to-air intercooler? No. Nope, you won't, because you'll have like I was talking about. If you're running let's say you're running 170 or 180 miles an hour like we did in the Mustang, and you have a front mount air-to-air intercooler, you have 180 miles an hour worth of airflow going through that core, and even though you have heated air going through it. So this will give you an idea. When I ran the Silver State in my Mustang with a Vortex supercharger on it, no intercooler, I just had a good cold air induction system like you should. The air inlet temperature going into the motor was 135 degrees at 7.3 pounds. And it stayed there consistent for the whole race because I was at wide open throttle for 32 minutes before I had to lift off and go through some turns. So 32 minutes at wide open throttle, it's going to stabilize. And if you have an intercooler, the same thing will happen. The intercooler will take that temperature away, and they work very well. What you will heat soak an air to water in that period of time. Do you always say air to air or no intercooler when using E85 because of the additional cooling effects? I say intercooler every time, regardless of what fuel you're using, but I don't drag race. So if you can get rid of the weight for drag racing and just run it with E85 and no intercooler, maybe there's a gain there, but I like the safety because when I monitor stuff on the engine dyno and I see charge temperatures that are 200 or 300 degrees, I don't care that the E85 cools a lot of that. I don't like seeing that temperature there. Brad, your good rule of thumb on header size is not accurate. We've made more than 1,000 horsepower with 1 3/4 headers. So that's not giving people that kind of information makes them think that they're absolutes, and they're not. Are you guys using the Holley ACM? What is the ACM? Are you doing an earlier YouTube broadcast regularly? Do you have a schedule? I don't have a schedule for the early one yet, but I probably will going forward. I like to keep it on the DL. I like to sneak it in there so nobody watches, so I can just talk to myself. Running a stock bottom end, 1972 302 stock head, small cam, dual plane, 700. Have a 150 shot. Is 28 degrees too much? Man, I get lost here. What happened? 28 degrees too much on 93 pump gas. Is 28 degrees too much with the nitrous? And what does the thing make peak power at? I don't know about. It says stock heads. I don't know which heads you have. Where does the thing want to run before you hit the nitrous? Richard, what would you do? I would add more boost. See, on a stock turbo Coyote, I was heading the right direction. Gen 2, 700 horsepower, streetcar E85 or methanol injection to keep pre-ignition debate. I would definitely run E85 over methanol injection. 68 Camaro, 5.3 or 6.0 carbureted turbo would be cool. You guys that are worried about heat soak, you shouldn't be. What LS heads have the most compression, or is it all in the piston? The head doesn't have the compression. The smallest chamber is the 706 head from the factory. And then the biggest is the 317. Yeah, I think the 317 is a little bit bigger than the LS3 head is. I don't know what the LS9 is or the LS7 is. Somebody can maybe answer that. Robert, there's no way for you to measure air intake temperature with the E85 with no intercooler because the E85 is only injected like right at the port. How much horsepower will the original S trim support? It depends on what combination you're putting it on. With those superchargers, the more powerful the NA motor is, the more power you're going to make under boost. But we've made 775 or 800, I think, with an S trim. And you guys that are talking about adding CO2 or nitrous to the thing, we didn't see much of a change in power when we did that. And we also didn't see much of a change in power running a fan through the air-to-air and then not running one. NAL86 with ported milled head, street strip truck, more street. Which can would you go with? Hunting 500 wheel horsepower, 500 wheel torque. I'm going to run a high ram because it's sexy. You should not run a high ram on that. You should run the factory intake. It's much better. And then BTR has a really good camshaft for that. 180 miles an hour on a Fox body has to be a white knuckle ride. I'm sure you had a lot of aero mod. I had the Celine aero package on it, and then I made a front and rear belly pan both for both of those. But once I had the suspension right, it was actually very good. The car was very good at that speed. I went 196 in that car, but it'd be much better in a Corvette. Richard, I had a question about your 500 horsepower LS combo. Which one are you talking about? In regards to the 4.8 you tested, what else would you use to squeeze out power NA, spin higher E85? I know you said more compression. I don't know which one you're talking about. I've never made 500 with a 4.8. I've done it with 5.3s a lot. A 4.8 was 475 or so, and we did it with a stock bottom end. If you did it with a motor that had valve release in it, so we put more camshaft in it, on that 4.8, we only use a 224 cam. And if you put a 231 cam in there, it would like as much cam as you could put in the stock piston to valve clearance. I think I could get a 4.8 if we did a milled head and the right camshaft and a fast intake. I think you could get near 500. Have you ever collaborated with Jeremy from Faster Problems? No, I have talked to him on the phone a couple of times, though. I want him to do a live chat eventually with his Ellis knowledge. Air-to-air or air-to-water for a street-driven truck with a PDS blower. A positive displacement blower, I would almost always run an air-to-water just because it packages better. It's hard to remote mount the blower or have a tube go in and out of it. I would always do an air-to-water on those. Since a centrifugal supercharger has a rising boost curve, is there any benefit to sizing pulleys to increase boost response and limiting piece? And are you limiting peak boost by doing the wastegator blow-off valve, or do parasitic losses become too great? Your parasitic loss is going to go up as you go up in or down in pulley size and you increase the impeller speed. It's going to go up. There's no way to get rid of parasitic loss. In fact, if you spin the blower faster and then use a blow-off valve to evacuate the airflow so it makes a lower boost number in the manifold, your parasitic loss is actually going to go up because the blower is processing more air for that boost level. So not a good idea. And the blower guys, the Vortec and all those guys will tell you that that's not a good idea. The air-to-air can heat soak. Porsche kept stepping up in size on the intercoolers on the GT2s because they'd heat soak on tracks. So it didn't help that they mounted them in the rear fenders. Yeah, they had an airflow problem on those. On a front-mounted air-to-air, on a realistic, like at 180 miles an hour, the Silver State, you're not going to have a heat soak problem. And the heat soak thing is an interesting test that I want to do because people throw that name around and it's not a real thing. They think that the intake manifold heat soaks because the intake manifold gets hot. Well, it's in a heated engine compartment. But if you have a cold air source of air going through that system and through the intake manifold, it's not transmitting that heat from the aluminum intake manifold into the air unless the air is going really, really slow. If the air is at wide open throttle, you're not imparting any air temperature into that. Richard, during your road race days in the Mustang, did you have to tear down the short block constantly? No, we didn't. On my Mustang, which was the stock engine, I ran it out the Silver State 12 times, and we just drove it out there and raced it and ran it back with a blower, mind you. Heat soak is real. Do you think that the Speed Daddy header for 3800 GTP is worth the hassle or just do logs? I have never seen a power gain from headers on a 3800. I've tested it multiple times and never seen any gain ever at all compared to the stock stuff. So you can take that for what you want, but I've never seen it. 2000 GTP with all the bolt-ons, intake, 3-inch downpipe, full straight pipe exhaust, yada, yada, yada. Our stock cat and Gen 5 blower with 3.4. Do you think it's safe to run a shot of gas in it? Yes, you can. You can run or nitrous on it. Just put good gas in it when you do it. I don't think 3800s are worth it. I would not buy them ever. Stupid bug. Get out of here, stupid cat. I've got a 95 T-Bird Super Coupe, over $10,000 in the engine alone. Too much to list, running high 10s, low 11s. You're running that on the 3800. So you're not doing that with an M90 supercharger. So how much nitrous are you running it on? So let me know what's going on. Give us the deets. What's the highest RPM V8 you've ever driven? I don't know that I've driven a real high RPM V8. Probably Coyote. Put an Eaton on your Maribara. Are you guys using Holley ECM on the LSF? I use Holley, the HP stuff, on all of the testing that I do. We have done other fast stuff, and then I also used the Mega Squirt, the MS3 Pro, on the 4200. What's a good range cam for a daily driver truck? The Truck Norris cam is really good. Highest compression heads. We already went through that. Friendly reminder, Mother's Day is 2 weeks away. Make sure to take care of your moms. Truck Norris. At the Don Garlits Museum, they say that some of the blowers take 2,000 horsepower just to run the blower. I think that that's probably overstating it. We do need to test the chili bomb. I have 120,000 miles on my C5, just headers. I want to boost it. The problem with the C5 engine compartment is packaging. It's hard to fit stuff in there. So things like turbos, as much as I would recommend them, they're hard to fit there. So superchargers actually are a really good consideration for that particular chassis. Dan, nobody's questioning the parasitic loss of the blower. It's absolute. The new Z06 is a nice high RPM screaming V8. It's like they did all the little tricks. I'm especially impressed by the intake manifold. I'm hoping that they bring it out. Not sure if you caught it. Is there any data on low PSI, high flow? So you want low boost and high flow. This one doesn't have that. It goes down to around 600 CFM, but the boost would be fairly low there, I would think. Although, see, I don't have the boost curves for that. I don't know what the change in boost would be for that blower speed. But that was only about, at the start of the run, it was only about 100 horsepower drive loss for about looks like 670 or 680 CFM. Nicholas, it's in the house. Can you send me a good 5.3 tune fire for a bone stock 5.3? I'm not a tuner. Oh, I don't have a poll for today. That's right. And it's almost time to go. See, I forgot about that. What's your opinion on having two different fuel systems, one for 91 and the other for ethanol? That's okay. Have you heard of EBL ECMs? I have not. That'll run TBI and TunePort. I have not heard that. Can you use liquid nitrogen to cool intake temps? Yeah, you can. You can use it to cool the intercooler. And I guess if you wanted to pour it on your intake manifold, although the outgassing is not going to be good. You don't want to draw that stuff in. Richard, twin charge small displacement. It's good. It works. Where I recommend twin charging, which would be a supercharger and a turbo, is that if you run a small displacement motor and a big turbo and you need something to help you spool the turbo, most guys just use nitrous, but you can also use like a positive displacement blower. Dan, a 454-11 or a stage 2 turbo cam will be running NA for a while before fun to go for a turbo. BTR still either one of those cams will work fine. I'm more interested in what are you doing? What is your plan to do after you run the turbo? What is the motor and how much power do you want to make? If it's a 5.3, I don't recommend either one of those cams. I'm struggling with a customer engine that requires 1.6 bore to stroke ratio. I'm finding piston weights and balance. Have you seen this out on the West Coast? I have no idea what you're talking about. Why is your thing predicated on a bore to stroke ratio? With 120,000 miles on my C5, are the piston rings still good for boost? How about nitrous? You can run nitrous on it. You can run boost on it. I like gapping the rings. Rear mount twins on a C5 is a great way to go. That's also another way to go, is you can remote mount the turbos. Heat extractor vents in the hood. I had those in my Mustang. Back in the day, before they had any cool stuff like that, what I did on my 5-liter Mustang was I took it over to a louver guy, and not even a guy that made louver sections that you cut your hood and rivet on or weld on or glass on or whatever. I took my hood off and took my hood over to him because my plan was at some point to twin turbocharge my Mustang because I thought it was going to be the coolest thing ever before I knew anything about anything. And what I did was had the louvers done in the areas where I thought the turbos would be. But when you're sitting at a stoplight, you can see heat radiating out of the louvers. And now that makes me want to go get that Mustang. But yeah, it'll help evacuate heat out. Would Rich or someone else be willing to take a close look at my tuning to check and see if I'm missing something, why I'm idling high? I'm not the right guy for that, especially if it's any kind of non-aftermarket ECU. I wouldn't have any idea what I'm looking at. Rear mount turbos work best on rear engine cars, so they only work good on Porsche engines. Maybe there are others. 2 more minutes. Darn, it's a 5.3. I'm using your stock exhaust manifold set up and looking to run 10 to 20 pounds is a really big range. Garage 50% of the time, street 45%, track 5%. I would put a small camshaft in it. I would put the truck Norris cam or a stage 1 truck cam in it so that when you're driving around, it's fine. Pick a turbo that makes the power that you want. An S475 for 1,000 horsepower, a GT45 for 700-ish horsepower, and away you go. It will drive much better. It will do all the things that you want it to do, make all the power that you want. You don't need those big cams. Have you seen any electric superchargers in the dyno room? I have not. Are 862 706 heads ideal for a 5.3 liter in a high RPM application? You need to not be not worried about the casting number on the head. You need to be worried about the RPM you're running and the power that you want to make, and also what intake you're running and what camshaft you're running and the valve train you're running. The heads would be the last of that concern. You need to have enough head flow to make power at the RPM range you're running. And an 862 or a 706 head is not going to be the one. If you want to make power at 8,000, that's not a stock head's not going to do that. Dyno belt drag with no boost, turbos too. I don't know what you mean by that. Yeah, there's no pole. I got going on my tirade and why does somebody want to know Dan's resume? Eric, happy to help. I have a CL55 AMG. It's just over 11 PSI with a stock twin screw blower and experience with these engines. I don't have any with those. What I can tell you is I don't know what that blower will supply, but any blower works the same way. So if you can prove the airflow going into the blower, like with a bigger throttle body, a ported entry, or the other thing you can do is if you can prove the power output of the NA combination, ported heads, camshaft, headers, exhaust, what will happen is if you improve that side of it, the boost will come down and the power will go up. If you improve the airflow going into the blower, the boost will go up and the power will go up. And you can also obviously spin the blower faster if you want to do that. I don't know on that particular application how much more power there is from that blower. I'm assuming that they left some on the table. Should Richard start reposting all his old videos? So the ones that I started on this YouTube channel with, I don't think we're at that point yet. 8.1 and 502 are different blocks. Yeah, one of those is I don't know what they're doing on the 502s anymore. If they're using Gen 6 blocks for those, if they're still using the old Mark IV stuff, I don't know what GM is doing because the 502 was never a factory one. It was only an aftermarket deal. Why did the builder of the Death Metal Charger not like it? I have no idea. I don't know anything about that car. I don't know who the builder was. I don't know who the owner is. I know nothing about that car. What's the highest mileage LS you've boosted? I think one of them was around 300,000. I know that the Gen 4 or the Gen 3 6-liter was 254,000. A 502 is not a tall deck. A 502 is a big bore standard deck. How much torque do you expect out of the Skyram? I've already seen the dyno results of the Skyram. Any future contact with Toyota engines? I haven't done any Toyota testing. Do you know a lot about 92 Fox body Mustangs? I have an 88, so yes. Come on, here we have some questions. Come on. I'm empty. Joe Boo needs a refill. So okay, that'll be the poll for tonight. Nothing there. Joe Boo needs a refill. What movie is that from? Come on. That Skyrim's going to make good torque right off idle. Unfortunately, they didn't run it down that low, which I thought that they should have. I saw the Skyrim on Amelia's drift car. That's right. It's not a league of their own. It's not another league. You guys are getting close, though. Tyler, why don't you like the 3800? You're talking to the wrong guy. What does inlet air temp have to do with idle RPM? Those two things should not be related, right? Yes, Major League. Come on, guys. Any GM conspiracies? And then what happened after he said that? What happened after he said Joe Boo needs a refill? Let's drop Nova sweepstakes information before I go. We can. So I'm giving away a 1972 Nova project car. You could win. You need to send me an email. I'll put my email address up here, but you need to be able to come pick it up in California. You need to not sell it. You need to have a motor to put in it, and you need to do a burnout video in 30 days, within 30 days of you picking it up. I think I'm gonna have Lisa pick the winner. Could you test older double overcam neon engines since you already have the 2.2 bell housing? Do a tall deck stroke or Cleveland with CHI heads. I've done a 400M, and I've done CHI heads both on a 302 and on a Windsor. So I did a Cleavor basically. Alpha N versus speed density on ITBs. You told me to check my IETs. No, not your IETs. Your not your TPS. Your idle air motor, not your inlet air temps. Notice he didn't answer my. Travis, you want something to be there so that you create a situation where it's there. I want something to be there, so therefore, if I say something, then it must be there. How would I know anything about GM conspiracies? Nobody tells me anything. I'm nobody. I'm just like you. Not that you're not nobody. I'm saying that I am. I'm looking at using an 80 millimeter VSR with a 110 AR hot side for a 9-to-1 6.2 LS. Would that be okay for the street? Yes. Are you wanting to do like 1,000 horsepower? What do you think of a 75 Cadillac 500? I have one of those. Mine's on a 75. I think mine's a little bit earlier than that. An idle air motor. That's right. Yeah, I look at the 400M as a Cleveland stroker motor, a tall deck one, right? Kenneth, you enter by sending me an email and telling me that you fulfill all the requirements. What is your opinion on high flow fuel pumps and aeration in the fuel tank due to so much return line? I don't know how you get away with that. I mean, you don't need a high flow fuel pump if you're not making lots of power. But if you are making lots of power, you need to have that. How many engines do you currently own? I don't know, 15 or something. Are you coming to Duck Cake Drabs? And I don't normally go to the drag races. Chinese turbos that you ran, or that have any qualities? I've not had any quality problems with them. Is a front-mounted intercooler worth it on a low-speed vehicle? Yes. Even if the intercooler is sitting there and not getting any airflow, it will change the charge temperature. Travis, what's going on with you? Why are you so negative? Did you need a hug or something? Richard Holder does like drag racing, but going to the event is a different thing. I know, Dan. I missed the GM conspiracies too. What do you think about Holley stone filters? Are you talking about the stone filters in the carburetors? I don't normally use those. We take those out. That's true, Cole. Everybody needs a hug. No, I get people on here that, and there's a few people that come, and I want them to come because we need obviously all kinds of different like personalities and points of views and stuff, because all that's good. I'm of the opinion that there's a lot of people out there, and especially the way that the United States is right now, people want to be around other people that just support their opinion, that reaffirm their opinion. They want to be validated. Oh, I think this. And so if I surround myself with people that say, yeah, what you think, yeah, let's get our torches and pitchforks and whatever, that's what they want. That's not what I want. I was told long ago that you should surround yourself with people that know more than you so you can learn from them, and also people that have different opinions so that you can check your own. If you learn new things, it might be that the thing that you think is absolute really isn't. And so if you surround yourself with people that just keep telling you, yeah, you're the greatest, yeah, let's do this, we're all together on this, we only like 69 Camaros. A 69 Boss 302 is pretty nice. So is a 56 or 57 Nash Metropolitan. So I surround myself with people that provide different kinds of information. But what will happen when I do that is you'll get people that are just negative Nellies. Just all they're looking for is the chance to jump in and say, well, you said this wrong, or you did this wrong, or I think, and that's okay. I'm here to be part of that. Nobody makes themselves accountable. That's the thing that makes me the most mad, is that whatever the rules are, let's set the rule. And then if you break that rule, there should be repercussions for your action. I don't care what that is, whoever decides on what the rule is, if you don't do that, then there should be consequences. Let's see, you're going to run a 250 on a 540 at 2-to-1, no intercooler on a jet boat. I'm thinking its presence is going to cost 75 horsepower at 5,000 RPM. Oh, okay. So Tyler, now we're not mixing it up either. Man, tonight's got a tough crowd tonight. Fascist pendant, someone could know less than you. Here's the thing about that statement, and I'm not picking on you, just so you know, because I get this all the time. I get people that tell me that they know more than me all the time, because I'm on YouTube, or because I've been doing this for 30 years or whatever, and I've probably done more dyno testing than most people. But when I go to visit other people that also do dyno testing, that have been doing it for a year, 5 years, or 10 years, or whatever, they always want to puff up and say how much more they know than me. Here's my spiel for those guys. You don't know more than me, and I don't know more than you. If that's the way that you measure yourself, you have a problem. You have an insecurity issue. Here's what I tell them, and this is what I tell everybody. It's not a more or less consideration. It's different. I went down a different path in my life than anybody else here. I can I can walk outside, I can go to a fast food place and point to anybody in that place and go, that guy knows something that I don't know. It doesn't make him smarter than me. It doesn't mean he knows more than me. It just means he knows something different, because my life went down this path and his life went down this path. And we decided, because of a lot of different reasons, that we were going to learn certain things. I didn't learn anything about molecular biology. If I'm talking in a conference where guys are talking about molecular biology, I'm just going to listen, because I really have very little to add. That doesn't mean that I don't know anything, or it doesn't take anything away from my value. If I go, like when I was at the Advanced Engine Technology Conference, when I'm up there speaking and I'm presenting, and then I go the next year where I'm going there as a person that's sitting in the audience and other people are speaking, and I'm learning where other people are telling me stuff. In which one of those instances do I know more? Well, the answer is, in both of those rooms, I know the same amount. I bring the same thing to both of those discussions. My value as a person is exactly the same. If I want to learn more, then I go learn more. And so what I know today, and if I go learn something else, then I now know something more tomorrow than I knew today. I've made myself better. It's never in relation to something else. And it's very difficult because, like I said, I get that all the time, especially from younger people that have just started dyno testing. And I know what I was like when I was younger, when I first started, that I knew everything and I was never wrong and all of that. And so I look at that kind of stuff and I laugh and I go, okay, dude, trust me, in 10 years, when we have this conversation, it's going to be a different conversation, because you're going to realize that, hey, really all of that stuff. And when I have this conversation about going off on different paths, it kind of helps people understand it. If you think that life is a more or less, that you know more than me or I know more than you, that's an insecurity issue. It has nothing to do with actual value. You shouldn't base your value on what you know in comparison to somebody else. You should only base it on what you know today versus what you knew yesterday and then what you knew tomorrow. And it's not a more or less thing. So that's my tirade. Blind guy, we need more common sense in the world. Braden, is it a waste of time to add two O2 sensors on each side? Normally, when we run stuff on the engine dyno, I have an O2 sensor on one side. Oftentimes, we will switch it from side to side after we've gone through the tuning. If the thing is responding and doing what we expect, we switch it to the other side just to make sure that it's the same side to side. But normally, we only run on one side. Tukalo, look at your statement, and what I want you to do is ask yourself why you made that statement. So putting down people that went to college, I'm guessing that you didn't go to college. Everybody that went to college isn't bad, and everybody that didn't go to college isn't good. That's a thing. That's what I'm talking about. It's not that. That's not what the world is. I wish I could give more than one thumbs up. You have two, right? I want to destroy the front-wheel drive Honda world. Why would you want to do that with a lacrosse and downforce? I don't understand that. Cameron, I'd like to see a 100% poll. I don't know that we ever will. Is moving ever fun? That should be close, you would think. But again, like I was talking about, our puppy's cute. I could put that up there, and I don't like puppies. I hate puppies. I just don't. I don't get it. Like I said, when you're surrounding yourself with lots of people, you're going to get people that are just fundamentally different than what you think common sense should dictate that they should act like. Headers, 180 degrees on twin turbo application. Could there be improved efficiency, scavenging, increased velocity, anti-reversion, spool time? How do you know you're not getting that already with the turbos that you have? I'd like to see the electric turbos. I haven't done any research on them. I think that would be cool if you could have the turbo spool up independent of obviously engine load. I like when people have competitions in the comments. It's interesting. So some people don't even get it. Audi's using a 48-volt electric supercharger. Move West Tech to North Carolina. I don't think West Tech is going to move. If they do, it probably wouldn't be too far away. And I don't own West Tech or have anything to do with it really. I just go there to test. Seen someone go down the rabbit hole on pulse timing on turbo headers. Look good on paper, but the actual build was a piping mess. Totally impractical. That's the problem. Is it? Can you do it and should you do it? Oftentimes are different things. And let's say that you could improve it, but the thing is, like we've talked about with different cams and headers, if you make a list of all the things that make a big difference, and then you make a list of the things that make a little difference, if we're talking about 1,000 horsepower motor, and we can already get that just doing the cam and springs and turbo, and then there's no reason to look at the little things. There's no reason to worry about, should I go with a 600 lift cam instead of a 585 lift cam? Or should I run a wider LSA or a tighter LSA? You're going to max the turbo out. You can already do that. So there's no reason to go to these little tiny things until you're doing things where that's required. Are you in a form of racing where that's necessary? Or can you just go from the GT45 turbo to an S475 and then make 1,000 horsepower now instead of 700 and not have to worry about doing it 1 or 2 or 3 horsepower at a time? Richard, have you seen people turn turbos into jet motors? I have watched that. That is kind of cool. I kind of always wanted to try that, and I never have. I just think it's neat from a visual standpoint. Have you ever broke on the? Yeah, I've broken lots of motors on the dyno. Any small centrifugal supercharger out there that can be sized for 1,100 horsepower? That usually takes a pretty good size one. Like 1,100 horsepower is like YSI kind of sized. Or the one that I like to use a lot is a the ProCharger F1A94 is really good, and it will do more than that. I think we've done over 1,000 horsepower at the flywheel with the D1X. Any experience or opinions on GPI products like cam stuff? I think that they do good stuff there. Brian has tested some of their stuff, and he's tested with those guys. So I've never met them personally, but it seems like that they know what they're doing. For turbo applications, what spark plug do you run? I'm more concerned with the heat range of the plug. We have some 8s and 9s and 10s that we run, and I'm not real picky about spark plugs. I put in some kind of heat range for something that I have. A lot of times with LS stuff, if I have one TR6 or one 27 or 29 Denso Iridium plug or whatever, one set, I'll just take them out of one motor and put them in another one and run them. Heard of ammonia burning in gas engines? I haven't seen that. What do you think about this? Will be the last one for tonight. What do you think about GMPP heads? Buddy bought someone for cheap for his LS3 bolt-on car, paired it with a BTR Stage 3 cam. You need a lot of motor to take advantage of what a set of ported LS3 heads will do. I have a test of them up. We ran a ported set on a stock motor, and it gained about 10 horsepower from the ported heads. Not because the heads don't work. They work very well. They flow another 40 or 50 or whatever CFM more than a stock head. So they certainly can support more power. But if they flow 350 CFM, let's say, that's enough to support 700 horsepower. Do you have all of the rest of the stuff below the head and on top of the head to make 700 horsepower? And that's the thing. You need to have enough displacement. Like when we ran the LS3 head, I think I did it with a 468-inch stroker so that we had enough motor to like take advantage of the airflow numbers that those heads could support. Because I think if I remember right, I think that some of the mast heads were on the ported LS3 stuff were probably in the 370 or 380 CFM. So that's enough to support like, 750 horsepower. So on an otherwise like, on a cammed LS3, that's way more cylinder head. That's like 200 more horsepower worth of cylinder head that most guys are ever going to use. So the stock head will support a lot. A ported head on an LS3 would certainly be the last upgrade I would make. I would do a cam. The LS3 intake manifold is also very good. So normally cams on the LS3 is kind of the way to go. Thank you guys all for showing up. I will see you guys all tomorrow morning.